Hello, this is Mark Holmes, the editorial director of Via Satellite, and we have another of our Thursday morning conversations. It's actually have someone a little bit different this time. We have Bill Chappell, who's the CTO of Azure Global at Microsoft. Microsoft done some very interesting deals lately in the satellite sector. So we're delighted to have Bill here today. But before we talk about satellite, we'll talk a bit about life under lockdown first. So Bill, how are you, and how's life been for you and your family over the last, I guess, 8 to 9 months now?
It's been interesting to say the least. Travel is a lot less. That's good. A lot of family time, some quality time. I think any strains you have in the family get sort of pulled further, and if you have a cohesive family, it kind of comes together, and it's like a test of what the group's all about. And so it's been good. I'm really enjoying being home a lot more. Of course, I really miss that camaraderie around the office. It's just something that you can't really recreate as much as we try to recreate it with our team's experience. It's not something that really can be recreated. So we have to go in. I go in about once a week. We still do some classified work, and so some mission essential work. And so it's great to be able to get in and kind of see everyone, and you realize how much you miss it once you get back in there.
I'm sort of curious with a company like Microsoft. One of the questions we've been asking people is, way back in March, were you sort of predicting things were going to get as bad as what they were, or did you sort of underestimate back then the impact of COVID? I mean, what was it like back in, I guess, early March?
Well, there's the corporate answer, and then there's the personal answer. I think on the corporate side, we took it serious from the very beginning, and we're one of the earlier companies to kind of really shut down and distribute. Now we're able to do that. We've had distributed operations globally anyway, and then have some of the productivity software, like literally that we create ourselves and then dog food ourselves. And so this is something that I think was maybe an easier call. So we were both, I think, taking it serious and able to react quicker. I went through a phase where it took a while for me to really grasp like that we're in a moment. I know February and March, it was overseas, and you were watching it sort of evolve. And in retrospect, it was like it was obvious that it was going to happen, right? But in that moment, it can be difficult to recognize and really make the change required, right, for something that was this big. And there's so much going on in the news, right, that it's like, well, is this really the catastrophic thing that is being discussed? And so I found myself like trying to look past it in the very beginning, and then when it really came on shore, right, it was obviously something we had to react to. And so I'd like to think like the moment I heard about it, I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is going to be, my kid's school for the next year is going to be canceled, or like, but it took a while to recognize exactly the gravity of the situation.
And we use these Thursday morning conversations. We kind of talk about some fun stuff as well. So, we're obviously all at home with our families, our kids, our loved ones. What sort of movies, dramas have you been watching together that you've really enjoyed, or sort of activities that you thought, well, that was really good? I perhaps never would have watched that.
Yeah. It's with the kids, I've got 13, 11, and 9.
Okay.
And so there's sort of things I'd like to watch, and then things that you watch, kind of with that family, with the family all together. We've done almost anything that's a quality sitcom, right? We've run through. We're currently watching, I think it's called The Good Place, which actually wasn't even like a highly rated NBC comedy, but it was, we found it interesting. My older kids are watching Stranger Things with me, which I think we're late adopters. We are the last people to get Netflix in the world. So we had a whole plethora of things that we knew everyone had watched, and we're just catching up on. So, we're trying to mix in some educational things too, obviously. I think family time means something a little bit different, right? When, their schooling is just different, right? I think, probably I would admit that it's not as good for the kids to be remote. Teachers are doing their best and whatnot. So when we do have family time, we try to mix in, some educational experiences on top of just the sitcoms and fun in the movies.
So what's your favorite sitcom?
Oh, favorite. That's tough. The one that we just went through, actually, my wife and I went 30 Rock was hilarious. Tina Fey did a great job with that. Going back, I guess not a sitcom, but series. I was a huge early adopter on Breaking Bad. Definitely not, I think, a sitcom, but and not something we're watching with the kids either. But that was actually an interesting show. I was an early adopter on it, and back at Purdue, we actually created a course around sort of the methodologies, how you would detect meth production. We took it pretty serious. We actually, it was like a senior design project where, because we were kind of watching the show and it was so good, we were like, okay, let's figure out how to like integrate that into an educational setting. And frankly, I don't think we got very far, but it was a hell of fun trying to, figure out what you could do. And there's some real issues in the Midwest at that time, still are, with some of the drug production. So, those are some of the shows that are really meaningful to me.
And if you could have like one favorite movie or one movie that, you would look back on and say that was one movie that I would watch again, or what one would you choose?
Yeah. Well, the one that I really liked Apocalypse Now in some, weird, dark way. It spoke to me. And so that was a movie growing up that, it's an older movie. So I was a, teenager watching it, it was, just the lighting, right? It's one of those first movies where I was like, okay, there's an art form to this, right? And that like absence of light can actually like convey a message well beyond just sort of what the words are. And, so that one always was meaningful. I actually haven't watched it in a long, long time. But that's one where it's like, you say, what's an important movie in your life? That one felt more significant than others. I really liked A Few Good Men and Tombstone, right? Two sort of classic, more lighter movies. Those are that's probably on my short list.
I have a bit of a confession to make. We bought the DVD of Apocalypse Now about 25 years ago, and we still never watched it. That's just it's one of those DVDs that always we'll get around to watching, and we never have. So we'll definitely have to try. I
understand. It's probably why I haven't watched it in so long. Like you don't, you got to be in the right mood. And I found, and it is true over COVID. It isn't. I'm looking for lighter fare. Right. I'm not really looking to be challenged as much. Like you're on, your Teams calls or your Zoom calls, up to 12 hours a day, you get out, you want to have fun with your family, you want to have fun with your kids, even if you have some alone time, you might not be looking to like really dive deep into, an art film or something like that. So I think at least for me, that's one of the sort of reactions to this whole thing.
We always ask people about music tastes and their big music life and stuff. Who are your sort of favorite artists, bands? Who do you like to listen to?
So actually, if you look behind me, you see some of the Michigan stuff here. I'm a huge Detroit homer. I grew up outside of Detroit. Okay. So right now I'm diving into sort of like the late 70s punk Detroit scene. So the one that I actually really like is the MC5. Which is a band that doesn't get its credit, and partially because they had some issues, and they were truly renegades, and both politically and with their lives and careers. So they a little bit short-lived, but were sort of, I think, really authentic and kind of spoke to that a really unique moment in the Detroit scene at the time. And so, I'm I kind of go all over the board. So from sort of that, the Stooges and the early punk days of that era to, I actually listened to country and rap and, all pretty much anything. It's whatever speaks to me at the time. So, but historically, so the two bands that just, if you say, what are your two favorites, the Beatles and Ben Harper, those are the two that are like always on rotation.
And you have you been at a concert that you look back on and think, wow, that was just.
I think Ben Harper is the one that, like, he still tours, and I go any chance whenever he's close to, either in DC or any of the locations close to something I definitely make time for. So he just is an artist that can just sit on stage with a guitar and make a really good show.
Well, fantastic. You've taught me something new today. I wasn't aware of a Detroit punk scene and stuff. So you've actually taught me something new musically, which is good.
Yeah, so authentic it couldn't get off the ground, right? That's the history of Detroit in a nutshell. But there's actually some real strong influences that cascade across the globe, actually, from those early days.
Let's talk a little bit about satellite stuff now. I mean, you and I have, we've done interviews. I mean, you've spoken at Cybersat and Satellite. Where is sort of, we know Microsoft recently did another new deal with SES. Where is sort of Microsoft now in terms of working with the satellite industry? What do you expect maybe to happen over the next year or so?
Yeah, well, the cloud and satellite, I think, are intertwined, moving forward. Just from satellites being a source of data that are going to be processed in the clouds, but more importantly, or sort of more maybe uniquely, what you can do with ground stations and speeding up the processing or lowering the cost of processing using either our edges as ground stations or just actually porting data into the cloud and doing processing. We're seeing some really good numbers there, and so I think that's going to be really unique. We have a huge investment in 5G. Same story, basically, virtualization of a network, pushing a lot of the function into the cloud. You're starting to see that sort of a general trend. So you have pretty light amount of hardware, right? When you want to do something unique that isn't software based, you can put that forward, but then a lot of the functionality increasingly is going to be done in the with a general software layer. Now that's either just in the normal cloud, or we have our FPGAs that we have in the cloud that allow you to do a lot of that, even the specialized compute, but in very large sort of farms of FPGAs and general compute combined. So there's, I think, a really good story moving forward, how we're partnering with the satellite industry. We're doing a partner play. We're not going to launch satellites on our own. But we've found lots of willing partners to work with on this, the digital transformation piece, but then also just how we enable them with our AI and our processing around the globe.
Have you been sort of surprised in any way about how these partnerships are developed, and I guess maybe the importance of maybe satellite in sort of a 5G ecosystem? I mean, or was it something that you always thought, well, this is a natural potential combination going forward?
Well, I think it depends. If you look at sort of the national security space, where a lot of these partnerships are centered on, then satellite's just an inherent part of any mission. So from that perspective, it's really a no-brainer. And the question is, how much do you go from those critical needs where you really can't rely on just a terrestrial backbone, right, into the commercial domain where you might have more and different options. So I think that's the open question is exactly how much the commercial portion of our partnerships, rise up as compared to having a more national defense focused. And
do you see sort of Microsoft doing more sort of partnerships over the next year? Are you in talks with other players? I mean, yep. What's 2021? Maybe?
Well, we're continually, exploring. We are an ecosystem enabler. That's sort of just literally in our mantra that is on the back of our our cards and our badges as we walk in the door. So you continually stare at that. We try not to compete with our customers. So we are continually in conversations with what's interesting. Just recently won an award for putting our AI in space directly, right? Not just in the ground station layer. So that's exciting, and very excited to see kind of where what we do today on the edge, goes into what we consider like the ultimate edge application of empowering satellites to recognize events or make decisions on where information needs to flow.
I mean, we all know. I mean, Microsoft's a huge company, and a lot of huge companies have got involved in space in recent years. How exciting is sort of space for a company like Microsoft? I mean, it seemed like a few years ago that, like, for example, I never necessarily would have seen myself writing stories about Microsoft partnering with satellite companies and Microsoft speaking at satellite events. It seemed to happen all of a sudden. So, I mean, how exciting as a company does Microsoft see space?
I think it's hugely exciting. I mean, it's an inspiring area, right? I mean, just from when we grew up as kids, it's one of those frontiers that just felt like it was the definition of high tech, right? And it's maintained that aura for forever. Like a lot of things kind of come and go, right? Is what's hot. Space actually, I think, has maintained that tech credibility through its entire through all the years, through its entire life cycle. So when we got into space, what I thought was really exciting is just how much excitement there was across the company. And we're not a traditional space player at all, but if you take a huge company of around 160,000 people, how many space enthusiasts do you have? And you've got it's literally thousands. And so we've had a really interesting internal response to what we've announced.
That's interesting, and obviously, looking to deepen that and go further. I mean, you said you're not wanting to become a satellite player, but or own satellites, but you can definitely see yourself getting more involved in the space and satellite sector going forward.
Yeah, you think about we're primarily a software company. We do a lot of different things, so it's not fair to pigeonhole us completely. But ultimately, we're a software company. As satellites get cheaper, access to launch gets cheaper, you're left with a couple things, right? The software development cycle will be a defining aspect of the cost and operations, and your ground network, right? Which hasn't, it's not going on a radically different cost curve today. And so we have a first or second largest ground network in the world. So we have a lot to say in terms of where you could actually locate your ground stations and tap into a private and secure network. So that's obviously a natural entry point. But even on the software development side, it's what we do for industries across the globe. And satellites are unique, so it's not like you can just repurpose directly. But we will have a lot to say, we believe, as things become more and more software centric, and it becomes more of a bottleneck of how the system operates.
It's interesting. We are sort of in the era of software-defined satellites, and there's obviously a move more on this side, and so it sort of stands to reason that maybe a traditional software company, if I can call Microsoft that, could obviously potentially do even more when it comes to the software on these satellites.
Software on the satellite, software on the ground. I think we're also excited about what we can do from an emulation perspective to make sure that you're learning lessons well before you actually do launch and experience things on orbit. And the last thing you want to do is have to explore and learn after things have been launched. So as cheap as things are getting, it's still not the place you want to be experimenting. So I think we have a pretty large play on emulation, ground stations, and then I think that next frontier, really putting our software in satellite directly.
And when might that happen, do you think? I mean, how far away are we from that?
We're working it now. We announced it as part of our Azure Orbital release and our Azure Space vertical that we created. We were lucky to get Chirag Parikh and Steve Kate to lead our industry vertical, and so they're leading our efforts in those directions.
Do you believe, I mean, we talk about often a revolution in our industry. It feels like we're at a permanent state of revolution in the satellite industry, but, we'll start of a new decade, potentially hundreds, thousands satellites coming up. As someone that's, if it's fair to say, not directly involved in the industry,
Mm-hmm.
where do you view where the industry is at right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in a state of change. It is being disrupted, I think, in a positive way, which is hard and confusing for incumbents, and it's hard and confusing for startups. I think it's healthy and it's good from a technology development perspective, and I think then you'll see some settling down of some of the business dynamics that will support it. I haven't been in the satellite industry directly. I was running the microsystems technology office at DARPA, where we did a lot of integrated circuit development for satellites, and that was sort of we're really component feeding into the satellite space, and I think it's an area which has always had really exotic, beautiful technologies behind it. I think the difference now is you get that exoticness and beautiful technologies mixed with sort of scale, and the ability to kind of have numbers on top of that. And what can you do in massive numbers that maybe you would have done in an individual system is an interesting exploration that I think everybody's going through right now. And we'll see. I think it's a mix. We've announced multi-orbit, multi-vendor as part of our partnership, right, on purpose, because we think there's a huge role to play for the massive numbers, but you're going to also get a lot of benefit from some of the traditional types of systems.
So Microsoft is really only getting started in the space satellite sector. Is that fair to say?
Yes, we are. If you look at the group we have that I run, we're focused on national defense. We focus on critical industries and critical infrastructure, and it's just natural when you in those three domains that a satellite backbone that supports you globally really supports our global cloud capabilities very directly. So we're in it for the long haul, and I think you've seen that in some of the recent releases and some of the hiring that we've done, and we're definitely squarely focused on this as one of our key industry verticals.
Interesting. Well, I always like to end on a fun question, and you mentioned we'll go back to your music taste, and you mentioned the Beatles as one of your top two. So name me your favorite two Beatles songs.
All right, so just classic Blackbird and Yesterday, just like the classics. What's the movie the movie was called Yesterday, right? And it's interesting to hear these songs almost for the first time. They're almost cliche in some ways. They've been around so long that you're like, oh yeah, it sounds almost like a commercial, right? You're like, it's just one of those like old 70s tunes. It's a commercial. It's been around for so long. But then you kind of hear it fresh again, and you're like, oh, and I'm actually starting to learn playing on the guitar, and you're like, oh, this is actually like, it's cliche because it's almost the perfect song, So, there's definitely sort of more, not as popular tracks, but like I'm actually getting like rediscovering some of those old classics that are the ones that everybody thinks of as the as the big hits.
Excellent. Well, Bill, it's been an absolute pleasure today to talk everything from Apocalypse Now, music, Microsoft in space. I think we covered so many topics. Really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Just want to wish you, your family, your colleagues, all the best of health and stuff over the next few months. And it's been a pleasure for us to see Microsoft come involved in space and satellites, and long may it continue, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you soon.
Well, thanks, Mark. It's been fun, and I like this sort of casual setting, and you can tell completely unprepared, and that's, I think, the way that we planned it, and I think it worked. I really appreciate your conversation.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.